Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Eric, and we are here with Christina and Alyssa. So, guys, we're going to start off our conversation here. We're just going to welcome you here today. We're going to start off with just saying where we're from, what we do for work, and just our general area of study. I'm going to go off and start off with myself. My name is Eric. I am currently a nurse at the moment, and I'm working at Memorial. I'm actually was born and raised in California, but I lived in Georgia here for a while. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. Now, Alyssa.
Hi, guys. My name's Alyssa. I'm originally from Atlanta. I currently work as a caretaker for home instead, and I currently study in medical assisting program, and I will be finished in May.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cristina Rico. I am originally from Oregon, and I officially moved here in March of last year. I have a BS in psychology, and I'm working now as a mental health care manager, working for an organization known as Mental Health Cooperative in Cleveland. So that's where I'm at, and we just, once again, want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are viewing, we're so glad that you're here. We can join in on this discussion on mental and physical health. So let's get started. We're going to get started with a word of prayer.
All right, guys, we're going to bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to just talk about just mental health issues and things that are going on in our daily lives, especially now the youth are struggling with so many things in their lives. And Lord, we just want to go ahead and just hope we can reach out to anyone out there at the moment and allow us to just be able to just talk about these issues and bring them to light to others, Lord. And Lord, please be with us, and we ask you all this. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
All right, so to get started, as we know, we are living in a worldwide pandemic. COVID-19 undoubtedly has had a tremendous impact in our lives, in our work, economy, healthcare, especially relationships, right? And so one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this is because we see the need. We see there's a significant need to discuss the importance of mental health and how that correlates also with our physical health. So to start us off, I just want to share a couple of statistics that are kind of frightening, and that's why we're here to discuss some of these topics. So nearly 8 in 10 adults currently say that the coronavirus pandemic is a significant source of stress in their life. 2 in 3 adults say they have experienced increased stress over the course of this pandemic. And that's just, stress, on a physical level. When you talk about considering the emotional toll that this also has had, over nearly half adults are reporting that their behavior has been negatively impacted. Things like tension, getting easily angered, depression, anxiety. These are all things that are very real that we're now starting to see increases since this pandemic has started. And talking specifically about stress and focusing more on our Gen Z adults. So the highest stress level that has been reported in 2020 was actually a 6.1 out of 10. And that has been a significant increase from the average, which is a 5.0 out of 10. And so why is it that the Gen Z adults are reporting higher levels of stress in comparison to other generations? For example, the millennials are saying 5.6. The Gen X generation, which is ages 42 to 55, are saying it's a 4.0. Boomers are saying it's a 3.3 for older adults. So it was interesting to see that statistic and kind of realize specifically the Gen Z generation is experiencing an increased spike in stress and anxiety. Why do you guys think that is?
Well, I think it has to do with a lot of things as far as what we are resorting to in those times of stress. So I know screen time, things like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Netflix, list goes on. We kind of use those as distractors for ourselves for maybe 1/4 of our day whenever we were stressed out at work. But now with this pandemic and we have so much time that we don't know what to do with, or we're at home and we can't go out, we use those distractors that we used to use for 1/4 of our time to now maybe half or 3/4 of our time, and that is constant input that we are putting in, and a lot of it is negative. And I feel like those inputs that we are putting in, it's going to put an output, and if we're putting in negative, we're going to get out negative.
So to start us off on this mental health, obviously mental health is a huge umbrella, right? And there's so many different things that we can talk about regarding our mental health. But we want to focus on three main points tonight that's going to help us kind of just learn what are things that we can do that we can apply to our lives so we can be aware of, that we can start doing now to help better our mental health. And the first one is starting with self-care. Now, I'll be the first to admit I am not the greatest at doing self-care. I get so caught up with the routine of work and other responsibilities, and then I just leave myself for last. I don't know, what do you guys, how is it with you?
Like, I can actually relate with you in that aspect because, like, when it talks about self-care, you tend to just get so focused on what you're doing, you know, on your daily, like, once you have a routine down, you just focus on that, and sometimes we forget to add in a little bit of self-care every now and again. Because at one point, it got to the, you know, I got to the point where I just wanted to just, you know, just do work, school, that's it, you know? And so a lot of the times that kind of eventually just burns you out, you know, and we don't devote too much time to ourselves, right? We just rely on other things, yeah.
Yeah, I think, I know it's definitely been a struggle for me because my schedule somehow this year has unexpectedly become very, very busy. And so it's hard for me to keep up with habits to remain taking care of myself, basically. So I try to incorporate, you know, physical activities, and but somehow life kind of gets in the way, and it's hard to keep those habits. But it's about the intention. I think we have to be intentional about what we're going to do on a daily basis.
So when you finally get to a point where, like, maybe your own body is telling you, screaming, like, I need a rest, what do you guys usually do for self-care? What does that look like for you guys?
We start off with sleep. I'm just saying.
Because we're probably not getting enough of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Start off with sleep.
Okay,
but,
sleep.
A
What
lot of
else?
the times has to do, for me, one of the biggest things, because I think a lot of, like, whenever, you know, the young people, we tend to get into this mindset where we just, you know, want to do so many things. And I started relying on going to the gym, being at the gym like 24/7, but I didn't want that to be my life, you know? And so for me, being active and just doing something, I pretty much told myself, as long as I'm active and going out and just not, especially right now with the pandemic, I can't really say that, but whenever all this started, I just feel like as long as I'm doing something productive, you know, but it's mainly just staying just in a, I guess, healthy, I guess you would say. I don't know if I...
Active,
active lifestyle, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Alyssa? What are the things, practical things that you do to practice self-care on the daily, or when you get a chance?
When I have that moment. Yeah, so kind of similar to Eric, I do enjoy fitness as well. So a way for me to have stress reliever is to engage in weight training. It's a passion of mine. And so I think physical activity in any sense, whatever you can find in like a little hobby in that area, whether it's you know, aerobics, or it's weight training, or it's CrossFitness, I think it's important to incorporate some type of physical activity in your daily life. I know for me as well that I have to set myself up for good habits, and so part of my self-care is to listen to Christian music when I'm going to listen to music. And maybe when I'm getting ready for the day, I'm going to listen to a sermon rather than putting on Netflix and watching Friends, which we, you know.
Good show, but yeah.
Good show. But, you know, I have to start being cognizant about what's going to benefit me. Is that show going to benefit me? Is it going to put me in a mental state where, man, I'm doing the same thing, I have no nourishment whatsoever, or am I going to do something that's going to give me nourishment and positive thoughts throughout my day?
So we want to hear from you guys. If you are tuning in just now, or if you started with us from the beginning, join us and commenting in the chat box below in our comments. Let us know how you practice self-care. Let us know what is it that has helped you. And so we can also read on those and share, and we can all learn from each other in that way. You know, and a point that I want to make regarding that specifically is the reason why it's good to share and talk about these things is because what may work for me may not work for you. It may not work for someone else. And so you do have to be intentional as to setting time to figure out what are the things that nurture you, what are the things that will help you relax in a state of anxiety or frustration or feeling overwhelmed. What are the things that we gravitate towards? And naturally, it is easier to gravitate towards those negative habits of, like you said, Netflix or, maybe music that isn't as uplifting, but we do have to be intentional to see, in the long run, are those things nurturing you, and are they improving your mental health? Are there areas where we can afford change and betterment for our mental health? Moving on to, listening to your body also is a great way that you can practice self-care, because sometimes, like we were talking about, we get so caught up in the routine, and it's not until your body just physically gives out, you get sick, or you just feel just a general lower sense of energy. And it's not until we get to that point where we're just like depleted, right? And so listening to your body and its signs, whether it's with anxiety, knowing what your triggers are, can really help you avoid getting to that point, of breaking down and having that, So practicing a daily routine of self-care is super, super important. The next topic that I want to talk about, kind of shifting gears a little bit, is about emotional supports. So we know that we were created social beings, right? And that relationships is fundamental. It's crucial. It's how we relate to one another. It's how we learn, how we grow, But I want to make the point that within our mental health, it is so important to find people that fill you rather than deplete you. What do you guys think that means? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
What I feel like it means is, having a specific kind of discernment for who your friends are going to be. And that doesn't mean where, you go to somebody and you're like, oh, look at them, look what they're doing. I'm not going to do that. It's not being judgeful, but it's discernment for what do you want to get yourself involved with. What are their priorities? Because whether you want to believe it or not, their priorities will soon be your priorities. And so I think it's very important to choose what kind of friends you're going to be spending the majority of your time around, because either way it is going to influence you heavily.
Growing up, something that I was telling Alyssa, I grew up with, my mom would always mention that, surround yourself with people who are going to make you grow, who are going to help you grow and be a better person, a better version of yourself, especially people who love God, put God in first place. I think that's something that I try to keep in mind in every aspect of my life when I make friends, because for me, I ended up going to public school. So a lot of the times, friends are not, the type of people who I met were not the people who wanted to go to church and all that stuff, and I ended up just trying to fit in. You try to get to the point where you just want to be okay with what they're doing, even though you know that it's not good. Mm-hmm. So eventually, you realize that that's not right sometimes. It's okay to take time to find those people who are going to make you into a better person, who are going to also want to grow with you. So, yeah.
Yeah, this mentality of finding the support system that's going to fill you, right, rather than deplete you. And I think that even though we may have those positive relationships, whether it be a therapist or a mentor or teachers, friends, family, that can be those positive relationships for you, I also think it's important to mention that we set boundaries with those positive relationships, because we don't want to become reliant or dependent on those relationships. We want to be able to have that be an additional support to you, but not that be the dependent, because who should be our main source of strength and joy and calm and giver of peace? It's God, right? And so when we look at it in that perspective, we are here to support one another and help each other grow and uplift each other towards Christ, but we also should be mindful about not becoming too dependent and reliant on those positive relationships, so that we all are able to share and grow and have that positive relationship be something that could be beneficial.
Yeah, I think I'm a living testament to that, because, as far as dealing with things involving anxiety in my personal life, I use that as a source, a coping mechanism, if you will. And actually, I wouldn't even say it was a coping mechanism, because it prevented me from coping. Because me spending time with my friends, which was a good thing, but I put it as an idol in my life, and it made it a bad thing. And so I was no longer confronting my emotions or what I was dealing with personally. So I put that above God. And I was not receiving any healing, although it looked like, oh, Alyssa's doing everything right. Look, she seems so happy. She's great. No. So that is something to be very, very aware about and be careful about, because the devil tries to trick you like that. Sometimes he likes to make a good thing, and if you do too much of it, it can turn into a bad thing. If you start to prioritize and put that above God, you're going to trick yourself.
So what's an idea for, like, we hear the word boundaries and we immediately think that that's a bad thing, but boundaries can actually be really good. They're there to protect you, they're there to protect the other person, and ultimately enable the relationship to be healthy. So, when I think of boundaries, especially with like friends and family and the positive relationships that we have or we want to establish, one of those boundaries could, look like, for me, for an example, it's always trying to remember if I'm having a rough day and maybe I'm going through a situation. I may not know what, like, for example, I may not know what you guys are going through, but I come to you because you guys are my friends. Maybe I've already prayed about it and I'm just still really anxious or overwhelmed. But always asking, like, hey, like, do you have the mental space for me to share what I'm going through? And I think that's also respecting where maybe where you may be, because I am unaware of maybe what you're struggling with at the time. And so maybe asking that question too, like, hey, like, I'm having a rough day. Like, do you have the mental space for me to just talk to you about something? Because that respects not just where I'm at, but we're understanding that, we're all going through hardship. And that's something that we can show mutual respect and love towards each other. What do you guys, I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on, like, any other boundaries that would be applicable?
I think just boundaries in general help keep us accountable to something, because we all need accountability. And without that, then we're just free to do with, whatever, right? You can just, I'm going to do whatever I want because I want to. I don't have a limitation for myself. I think it's good to set boundaries. I feel like, in today's society, it's like, oh, do whatever you feel like is right. And even though that's true, but sometimes we kind of use it to justify some wrong actions that we do. And so to set boundaries for ourselves, I think is, and using, I think, the Bible as a map to boundaries, I think is very essential in that process, because, we're not the best judge sometimes. So.
That's honestly a good point that he made. He was mentioning how although we have, we say that we want to surround ourselves with people who are going to better our lives, we also shouldn't just keep them, just close ourselves off to other people who we can be a blessing to, who we can help others, So I think that's a great point, actually.
And I think that it's important too to clarify that as far as like a community that we're searching for, those people are going to be the people, I think, that we go to in times of need, that we need some wisdom, or we need some kind of common sense maybe even, or even a prayer for us, that, those people, that doesn't mean, ditch all the heathens or something, but, we, that doesn't mean not to engage with them. Of course, my philosophy is be friends with everyone, be nice to everyone, treat everyone how you would, if you're my best friend and I hate Eric for some reason, then I'm going to treat you guys the same. I don't want there to be that,
The golden rule.
animosity there. So it's having that network for support, but then also showing that Christian light to other people in other friend groups.
And that's interesting. Thank you, Pastor, for bringing that up, because another thing too that ties into this is also understanding that the most important relationship that we should be nurturing, that we should be intentional, is our relationship with God. And the more that we grow in intimacy with God, and learn of Him and grow with Him, that automatically will result in us being able to share that love of God to other people, whether it's our support system or our friends or family, anyone really, because we, by beholding, we become changed, as the Bible says. And so if we are beholding God's character, if we are intentionally growing in our relationship and our walk with Him, we're placed in a much better position to reflect that love and God's character to those around us. So, moving on to the last point that I want to mention discussing mental health is, this shift that we, rather abruptly shift that we have been established, which is now our virtual reality, right? Everything, as soon as we hit quarantine, everything was on lockdown, church services, schools, work, and we had to pretty much adapt rather quickly, almost like abrupt, to this virtual reality. And there has been numerous studies, confirming or showing, supporting evidence that this additional screen time, even before COVID, screen time and how that impacts our, emotional and mental health. But specifically in this year, we have seen spikes in that as well. And what are the ways that screen time has affected, our health? One of them, obviously eye strain. We're now spending excessive amount of hours on our laptops, tablets, whatever it may be, through school, through other devices for other services or work or whatever, or meetings, whatever it may be. So that can develop eye strain, that can develop, the development of myopia, which is basically the development of nearsightedness, headaches, so these are just a few of the things that are resulting as effects as a result of this virtual reality. But on a deeper level, we've seen, obviously, this isolation from people, and how has that increased so much cases in anxiety and depression? Because we're no longer associating, we're no longer relating, we're no longer able to have the activities normally that we once had before when it comes to deepening those relationships with people face to face. And also because of this bombardment of news and tabloids and media, it's been inhibitor of our peace as well, and so we've seen not just the restlessness and all these other areas where this pandemic has affected in our work and our economy, but also on a deeper level, just personally, when we don't feel at peace, what are we left with? Anxiety and stress, So one thing that I wanted to point out as I was, preparing for this with you guys, but as the verse Philippians 4:4-9. I'd like to go ahead and read that so we can share and discuss it.
Would you like me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Philippians 4:4-9 says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the peace of God will be with you."
Wow, that's a loaded,
Very powerful.
very powerful
Very
scripture. What are your thoughts on that?
I've studied this verse a lot because, just putting myself out there, I struggle with anxiety, right? So this verse came to me actually in a book that I was reading, and I've read this verse many, many times, and I kind of saw it in a routinely manner, and, just like, oh yeah, think about wonderful things. Yeah, I get it, okay. But the way the author broke down what Paul is saying here, I found so profound. I feel like it's a really in-depth guide on how to find peace and relief in times of anxious moments. The first verse says, "Rejoice in the Lord," and again I will say rejoice. So to me, I see that as we need to be praising God for what He's done in our life and what He will do. Have that faith that He will answer our prayers, because He hears every single one of them. In the next verse, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. God hears our prayer every single time. And we have to have that faith, and he knows, he can see our heart. And so he knows when we are saying a prayer 100%, 99.5%, or 50%, etc. And so I think being very intentional and meaningful in that prayer and just giving it all out to God. If that recalls crying or screaming or a silent prayer, whatever that form looks like, do it. The next verse says, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds. The peace of God is going to come over you when you 100% give yourself to God. You're giving that full situation. And that was my problem. I didn't want to give the full situation. I'm a little stubborn, so I wanted to keep, half or like 1/4, and like, okay, God, I'll give you this bit, but like I can take care of this part, And so when he sees that full relinquish of control, he will give us peace. And I find that, the next step, verse 8, I believe, through 9, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is pure, noble, righteous, lovely, admirable. At first, I thought of just, think of a happy place. So when I read these verses, I was like, oh, just think of a lovely thought. Nice beach, isolated island, Or, so that's what I would think. And then as I went deeper, I'm like, oh, God is talking about think of the praises that you can give to God. All of the miracles that he's done in your life, because there are miracles. It's whether you want to see them as miracles or not. And giving him praise. And I know I'm a living testament to this, because there was points in my life where I was experiencing high anxiety moments, and I didn't know what to do. And I was, I'm driving, and, we know what happens during a panic attack. It's not pretty. It's not nice. And I feel like the Holy Spirit just touched me in that moment and said, listen to some music, sing my praise. Even though you feel like you have nothing to be grateful for, you do. And so just do it. Just kind of try me. I dare you kind of thing. And so I said, okay, God, I'll do it. And I cannot put into words the amount of peace that overwhelmed me in that moment. Never experienced something like that. And it's true what Paul is saying here. Think of these lovely things, these praiseworthy things, these noble things, these right things, these lovely things, and you will have peace. And then at the end here it says, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen these things, put into practice, and the peace of God will be with you. So it's not just saying, do it once, ija, you're done. It's saying, put it into practice on a daily moment. Sometimes it may be a moment by moment, yes. I've had those moments. And God is guaranteeing us peace. So I love how Paul just writes this out here.
And it's perfect for the times that we're living in now, And it's interesting that you brought up the point about control, because ironically, we don't have control. All we have is anxiety and stress, But the minute we surrender that and we recognize we don't have the control, that God is in control, and that as soon as we are able to be intentional, like you said, and practice that mentality of thanksgiving, and like it says there, like with prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, that is so hard to do when you're going through something, right? To be thankful, or to go like, I don't know if it's I don't know what it is, but we that's not our reflex, to do that. But we have to be intentional, and it is something. It's a habit. It's a habit that can develop into just something that is going to be natural. It's going to be our new reflex to go to God with thanksgiving, with prayer, when we are going through anxiety, when we are stressed out, to go to the one who gives us peace. Even if we may not understand. We don't understand why this pandemic happened. We don't understand how. We don't understand why. We don't understand a lot of things that happen in our lives. But what if we don't need to? What if we're just called to trust God and allow him to take control of our lives, allow him to be the peace in our lives, even if we don't understand? that's okay, because he's coming soon, and we'll understand a lot of things that we didn't on this earth. So I think that's awesome to point out as well.
When we're talking about this, because when we were talking about initially, before this all started, I was looking at the verse that you had mentioned, and this verse actually is a verse that I just started pretty much going back to everything, and it all started on Philippians 4, on verse 6, where we read it. It pretty much says, "Do not be anxious about anything, and in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, you want to give everything to God," right? And so for me, it was about 4 years ago where I pretty much hit rock bottom. For me, it was just like one of the toughest times in my life. And so being able to surrender is not something that, like you mentioned, you can't really just do. But you learn that, if it hasn't been working your way, then, why not give it up to God? I mean, your way got you to where you are right now. And so I know that a lot of the times, I know we might be having some students here who are listening, and I can understand for some of you who are probably in classes and are in the dorms, that's during the time when I had my lowest point. And so I can understand. And so this is the time where, allowing God to take control is actually one of the best things that I did, even if it means just struggling with not being able to be in control, because that's what I wanted. I wanted to be in control. I wanted to be the one who made the decisions, but in the end, you realize that God has best interest in you. All right.
So we're going to shift a little bit to discussing physical health and how also that correlates with our mental health.
So as Christina was saying, some healthy habits that you can set up for yourself. One of them that me and Eric were talking about being some form of physical activity. And I think that can be so pivotal for our progression as far as whether you're dealing with anxiety, depression, whatever your scenario is, because there's something about being active and going, whether that's outside or in the gym or playing a sport, whatever you choose. There's something about that activity that I think brings a positive element into your mental state. Being active, going out, and doing something productive, I think. Sometimes I feel like we get so anxious sometimes. I'm not saying this is the direct cause, but, are we helping ourselves by staying inside and just watching Netflix all day? I think if we had to choose one, are we going to feel better by doing something productive or just sitting on the couch and, trying to cope with our feelings that way? So I feel like that is such an essential part of healing and trying to deal with anxiety and depression. And with that, I think, brings health. Because sometimes I don't think we take into account of how much we put into our bodies affects our mental state. And I have seen the effects of these different elements that we're going to talk about happen in people, and I feel like there's not enough awareness about it, with how our diet, how our nutrition on a daily basis can affect our mental state. So I know there's a lot of caffeine and coffee drinkers, and that's a thing. And I know it's kind of hard to get away from that, but truth of the matter is that caffeine is a stimulant. It can it causes a jittering effect that is similar to one you feel in a traumatic event. So when we're talking in terms of anxiety, caffeine, not a big helper. Studies show that it can cause anxiety to worsen, or it can even trigger an anxiety or panic attack. What does caffeine exactly look like? I mean, caffeine takes a lot of forms. When it's not just coffee, I think that's the main thing. It can show up in our teas. It can show up in energy drinks. It can show up in chocolate. Chocolate thing. Yeah. Qué triste. So it can...
How much caffeine is in chocolate?
How much do you eat?
Well, considering the recent holiday. Just kidding.
it won't be as much as you would see in a caffeinated beverage like coffee or an energy drink like Red Bull perhaps, but it's still something I think we need to consider and put in the back of our minds whenever we're consuming some of these products. I mean, coffee, and more specifically, all these caffeinated beverages, I mean, they're going to cause a faster heart rate. They're going to cause high blood pressure, potentially hypertension, digestive issues, shakiness, headaches, nervousness and restlessness. It can cause sleep disorders. And when we think about sleep disorders, that can be a very huge cause to anxiety, not cause to anxiety, but it will not really help anxiety because your body needs that rest. And so when you're constantly feeding it caffeine, you are not allowing it to rest. I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, I had a question. Would you say that it just becomes like a vicious cycle almost? Like, you know, you aren't anxious, so you intake caffeine because you have to stay up to study for a test, or you're stressed out about something, and then that, in turn, like you said, it can impact like sleep disorders, and it's just like one thing after the other.
Yeah, well, talking on that, like, when it comes to caffeine and how it affects your body, a lot of the times your body tends to get pretty much accustomed to what you're taking in. So, for example, if you're just taking in a cup a day, your body's going to say, oh, okay, we're going to relax, it's going to be good, and you don't feel that effect eventually. So what you do, you tend to just take another cup and another cup until you feel that effect, because that first one didn't do anything until you're up to 3, 4, 5 cups a day, every day. And I mean, I know we're live here, but for me, I got up to 7 cups a day. I know it's not about, it's crazy.
Lord.
I know.
Where are you at now?
Thankfully, I don't drink coffee anymore, honestly.
Oh, wow.
It took me a long time to get over it, but working in the medical field, you're up, you wake up early, you get home late, you need something to get you going. And so it gets to the point where you're just like, okay, this is just not doing much, and so you keep going. But I realized that at one point, my anxiety just kept going up, because whenever you drink coffee, your palms get sweaty, your heart gets racing, your blood pressure goes up. And so we want that because that gets us moving, right? And so I ended up deciding to just let it go, because I wanted to not rely on that in order to get me through the day, you know? And so it took me a long time, but slowly, progressively, you remove it. And now, we switched to Café Roma,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so.
SDA coffee, amen.
Amen. Yeah. So.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on what Eric was talking about. I mean, caffeine is designed to give you instant energy, right?
Correct, yeah.
So it's going to shoot up, and hypothetically speaking, what comes up must come down,
That's
and it's
right.
going to go down the same way it come up. So when you experience that rush of energy, you're going to see a crash in energy, and so that doesn't become reliant, and your body is going to suffer at the hand of that. As well, I mean, I know there's some coffee drinkers who take it black, and they don't put anything in it. But I know there are a lot of people out there who put the creamers and they put the sugar, and you're one of them.
It was.
So, I mean, that can be a huge inhibitor too. The sugar causing fatigue, sugar also causing a crash, because that is going to give you another spike in energy, and it's going to give you another crash in energy. It also inhibits with sleep and causes sleep disorder. So when you're combining those two, you're kind of setting yourself up for disaster. And so we really need to be cognizant about what we're putting in our bodies. And as what Christina was saying, that is it kind of just like a cycle with with getting caffeine, and then you have anxiety and all that stuff. I think people who are already suffering with anxiety or depression or whatever you're dealing with, you're probably not sleeping that well at night. I don't sleep that well at night sometimes, so I know I'm not the only one. And when we wake up in the morning, our first thing is like, oh, well, then I gotta put some caffeine in my body so I can wake me up. And in actuality, we are actually harming ourselves, because that's going to make the situation worse. And what I don't think we realize yet so much is that how significant or insufficient carbohydrate intake can affect us so much, because I can't help but notice and take note of the fads of all these diets going around and promising you do this and you can lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks. And so a lot of these fad diets tend to lean towards a low-carb intake, which when you look at it scientifically, it is very harmful to the body, especially when you're dealing with anxiety or depression or things like that. Low-carb intake is going to just equal low energy. That's your body's source of energy. And so if you want to substitute it with caffeine, that is, again, is just going to give you a quick raise and a really, really bad low eventually. So consuming the proper foods as far as carbohydrates can have a similar effect if you are to caffeine if you're consuming simple carbohydrates. I'm not going to tell you, never eat bread or something.
We need the bread.
we need the bread. But, making more mindful habits for ourselves is what we're going to put in our bodies. Simple carbohydrates such as a lot of fast food, a lot of candy. A lot of candy does that. Chips. White bread, those are all simple carbohydrates. They give us that same kind of energy where it just kind of shoots up and then it'll go back down. There's nothing really to stabilize that unless you were to have a source of protein with it. We won't get into that today.
So Chick-fil-A is a simple carbohydrate.
Chick-fil-A's breading is a simple carbohydrate.
Okay.
I'm sorry, guys.
Wow.
But
pierced my heart.
Mine too. Making better decisions as like whole grain bread when we're consuming carbs. Whole grain rice is a good source because what that does, that complex carbohydrate, instead of giving you a shot of energy and then it goes back down, that glucose will not just shoot down. It will gradually go down. And so that's going to be much more efficient energy for you. It's going to last you longer throughout the day. You're not going to feel this random sense of fatigue in the middle of the day and you're wondering why do I feel tired? That has a lot to do with it. I'm not going to say it's the only thing. Sleep has to do with it, caffeine. But, that is a big factor. Consuming low carbs can cause cortisol levels to spike up. Which actually can increase risk for depression, insomnia, immune system problems. So when we're talking about things like the pandemic and COVID-19, and you want your immune system to be at the peak, doing everything you can to keep that up, and especially for depression. I mean, if you're already struggling with that, and you're not eating enough carbs, that's just recipe for disaster. Low carb intake can, it impairs the function of the pituitary gland, which I'm sure you guys have kind of heard maybe through high school or middle school or something. It's like the master gland, so that, regulates hormonal levels. So when we think about anxiety disorders and depression, medically speaking, there's some hormonal imbalance, right? And so what are we doing to help ourselves is basically my point here. What are we putting in our bodies that's going to give us a positive outcome rather than a negative? And I know these are a lot of things that I feel like the youth intake on a daily basis or don't intake enough. And so I really wanted to touch on that and discuss the effects of not taking or taking it.
And I wanted to share, too, a couple quotes from Ellen White about this mind-body relationship and how there is that direct correlation that, our body impacts our mind, and our mind also correlates with that. And so this one is found in Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene, Mind Affects Body, and it says, the relation which exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health of the physical system. If the mind is free and happy from a conscientiousness of right-doing and a sense of satisfaction in causing happiness to others, it creates a cheerfulness that will react upon the whole system, causing a freer circulation of the blood and a toning up of the entire body. The blessing of God is a healing power, and those who are abundant in benefiting others will realize that wondrous blessing in both heart and life. I thought that was powerful because we see just how much, how strong this mind-body relationship really is. And if we are able to practice, here I mentioned tearfulness, the sense of satisfaction in causing happiness to others, that impacts your physical body, as an entirety, and that's amazing. One other one that I wanted to talk about is more specifically talking about the brain. And this is a well-nourished and healthy brain found in manuscript 24. And it says, the brain is the organ and instrument of the mind and controls the whole body. In order for the other parts of the system to be healthy, the brain must be healthy. And in order for the brain to be healthy, the blood must be pure. If by correct habits of eating, like what you were talking about, and drinking, the blood is kept pure, the brain will be properly nourished. So even just that, we see like what we are putting in our body, what we are eating, what we are drinking, is going to directly affect our blood, and that is going to impact our brain health and our mental health.
I mean, I think if the overall point had to be made, I think that hits it right there. Just whatever you're going to input, you are going to get as an output. And that means what you're putting in your body is food consumption, liquid consumption, what you're putting into your body in the sense of visuals, what you're putting into your body in the sense of audio. All of it is going to give you an output. So you kind of have to ask yourself, what are you going to input for today? Is it going to be meaningful, or is it going to be not meaningful? Is it going to cause you negative thoughts or positive thoughts? And making those conscientious decisions daily, moment by moment. Sometimes it's not just a daily, Paul says, take up your cross daily. Sometimes we got to take up our cross like every 5 seconds. So, because that's how it is sometimes, especially when you're dealing with anxiety and depression. And you have to make that, that moment by moment decision. Am I going to do something good, or am I going to do something bad?
So, just to wrap up, I know this is a lot of information, and, we're talking about two very big umbrellas, which is mental and physical health. And we wanted to just touch on a few topics that we feel are just more pertinent to, the reality in which we're living in now. So emphasizing, again, self-care, the importance of self-care, emphasizing the importance of having your support system, your community, and making sure that they are people that fill you and not deplete you. And also talking about, this virtual reality, how we can better manage that, and finding additional ways to take those breaks from our screen time, take those breaks to do things that are going to nurture your mental health, and help you, avoid some of these physical effects of, all the screen time that we're not having to adjust to. And then, of course, the physical health aspect of things. So we are, near our mark now to wrap up with our Q&A. So we want to just open the floor to our viewers, people who are listening, about if you guys have any questions regarding the topics that we've touched on. We just want to open up the floor to you guys now, or if you just want to comment on, something that you felt was impactful to you, or provide, suggestions as to what you do to stay mentally and physically healthy. We want to give you guys the opportunity to also tap in and let us know. So we'll do that.
I have a comment. Something that has helped me during this time of pandemic has been journaling and writing down. At least every day I try to write 3 things that I'm grateful for. And sometimes, like so many negative things happen, but just finding those 3 things that I'm grateful for changed my mentality and my attitude towards God, remembering, He's still in control and He's still very near me, and, there's so many reasons why I should complain, but He's by my side and He's helping me. So I've found that has been very helpful.
And there's like little things that we can all do. And I love that point where you said you do a journal. For me, it was always, I don't know why, but like you guys tell me, especially the youth, a lot of the times we forget to pray. We forget to ask God for guidance. And at one point, I just got up, went to school, did everything, come back home and just slept. But my mom would always encourage me to go and pray and allow me to just leave everything to God. And whenever, like I said, I was at my lowest, I would always, I started to figure out, what can I do? And so I made it a point in my life to pray every single day, and not just pray for just asking God to do something for me, but instead just thank God for what he did for me that day. And so I did it for a whole month just to stay consistent. It was tough sometimes because I would be in bed and I would be like, oh, okay, I got to get down and just pray before I went to bed, even if I was so tired. And over the course of that month, ever since then, I have prayed every single night before I went to bed or when I got up and everything, because it's been something that has helped me every single day to move forward, and just allow God to take control of that day, especially before I go see my patients. I'm in the car and I'm praying, allow me to just, be a blessing to somebody, during my time here, or someone to be a blessing in my life. And I have had some great encounters with patients who, especially if you do have God in your life, you will reflect it, to them, and they will notice and they will be appreciative for what you do. And so I think that is a great point too. So I think forming little habits will help you as well.
Yeah, I know that was something that definitely helped me during the beginning of this pandemic, especially, what I was going through emotionally with all the anxiety and how it, kind of worsened during the isolation period or the quarantining period. And I noticed one thing other than, strengthening my relationship with God, of course, but what I did was I ended up just writing everything I was feeling kind of that day, just like a prayer to God. It was a written prayer to God for me, and so I was able to kind of find some things out about myself that if sometimes we don't allow ourselves to find out because we're so busy, we're having so many stimulants throughout, whether it's screen time, whether it's school, whether it's work, friends, and we have our attention elsewhere, but we don't have that time to ourselves where we do reflecting and what's going on really with me. And so it helped me in the process to discover, oh, this is what I'm doing. I need to fix that. And so it helped me in those realizations.
And one of the things that this pandemic has allowed is for us to have more time. And, at least for me, it's allowed me to have more time with God. And I remember when it first started, I was very, very afraid. And one night, it was like almost 3 a.m. and I couldn't sleep because I was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to the whole world and blah, blah, blah. And like all these thoughts came to my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, is Jesus really coming soon? And like I started to pray because I just could not sleep. I was so tense. And, I usually don't get like that except when I have to speak in public. But this verse came to my mind. En el perfecto amor no hay temor. El amor quita fuera el temor. And, it was like God telling me, you don't need to be scared. I'm still in control. Don't be afraid. Everything is going to be fine. And, ever since that night and that moment, like, I've seen, of course, so many news and all this, but I lost my fear. It's not that I'm irresponsible. I don't care about it, but I'm just not afraid. Like, that night I was like, whatever happens with my life, even if I were to die or whatever, you're in control. So I don't have anything to fear. And so, I'm so grateful because the Bible and the promises that it offers us can help us in those times when we feel anxious and we just have no control over our lives.
Una de las cosas que he aprendido en esta pandemia es que aprendí de alguien incluso que me enseñó que lo mejor para quitar la ansiedad, por lo menos en uno, evitar momentos de estrés, de ansiedad y todo eso, es reconciliarte tú mismo con la peor situación que tú puedas enfrentar en la vida. Por ejemplo, ¿qué pasaría si muere toda mi familia? ¿Qué pasaría si mañana me entero de algo demasiado grave, ¿me entiendes?, en mi vida? Entonces, en el momento en que yo me reconcilio con eso, ya Dios me pone, estoy listo para enfrentar ese momento. Entonces no tengo problema el día que se tenga que enfrentarme o cualquier otra situación que venga. Y yo creo que eso tiene que ver mucho con conocer a Dios también, con el hecho de tú tener una relación con Dios y conocer cómo es Él y que Él es bueno en todo momento y que nada malo viene de Él hacia ti. Entonces te ayuda a ver todas las cosas de una manera diferente, de una manera más positiva y no estar todo el tiempo en pánico y pensando que estás haciendo algo que quizás estás desagradando a Dios y por eso son las consecuencias de lo que está pasando, ¿me entiendes?
Okay, we have a question. It says, how do you guys deal with friends that are not as intentional as you are when taking care of your physical and emotional health? How do you stay focused? We'll put it here.
I guess we can give different point of views. Okay, so at one point, a lot of the times, for me, it had been more of a self-motivation, my desire to actually want to be better for myself, because there was a point in my life where, like I said, I was at my lowest, and I wanted to be better. I know that for me, I had people who didn't really want to go to church. I wanted to do more of drinking and stuff, and I understand that they wanted to do all that stuff, but I didn't want to. I wanted to actually better my mental health, so I took it upon myself to do all these things in order to be in a better place in my life. So it just depends on how you react. Sometimes it could be surrounding yourself in a different circle, finding people who see things in a different perspective, or in a perspective similar to yours, where you want to be. Looking up at, I had my role models throughout my life that have helped me get to where I'm at this time. So.
Yeah, I think, I know friends are obviously, some of them are like second family almost, and so it's kind of hard to separate that, especially when mentalities or ideals are not aligned. But, and I'm going to be a little blunt, your friend should not determine whether you get better or not. And if you need to separate yourself in that sense, for that self-nourishment, for you to do whatever you need to do to increase your health mentally and physically, then you have to separate that, because it should not be dependent on whether your friend is going to join you or not. Even though that can be fun and amazing if it happens, but it should not be reliant on that.
And it just goes to touch what we were talking about earlier about boundaries. It's okay to have boundaries with friends and family, even that may not have or may not be living the same values as you are, but you can still maintain that friendship with them. You can still be that positive impact for them in their lives, be a blessing for them, but also acknowledge that it is okay to set those boundaries with those people if they're not mirroring your values, or if they're also just not as intentional as you are as far as like bettering yourself. It is okay to limit and set those boundaries with them as well. And like what you guys have already touched on, expanding to different circles of people, that do mirror those values, and that gives you in turn an opportunity to share back with those family and those friends as well. Well, that is pretty much all time that we have. We want to thank you again for joining for our very first youth edition of Conversemos. So this will be something that we will be doing moving forward. So be on the lookout for the next announcement for our next segment on this. And we just thank you for joining in. Thank you for being part of the conversation. And yeah, we'll definitely see you guys next time. We're going to close with prayer, and then we have an announcement at the end as well.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity for us to share, just talking about mental health and just healthy lifestyles that we can apply in our daily lives. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to just share this with people who may also be going through similar things that we are going through or have gone through. Allow us to continue to do well, and we ask that you please be with us and throughout the rest of the night, Lord. We ask you all this in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. So very quickly, we just wanted to take the time to announce our next Jóvenes event, which is upcoming this Saturday at 3 p.m. We are going to have what's called drive-through prayer, right? Yeah. So the idea is exactly how it sounds. We're going to be meeting up at 2 different locations, and we do have the sign-up open. We also have our flyer that is posted on our Instagram, Su Casa Church JA. Give us a follow on Instagram if you haven't already, and we'll be providing and updating all of the flyer information details, and then also the phone number to text Carolina in order for you to be able to sign up and participate on that. It's going to be a good opportunity for us to get together, pray with people that we're going to be interacting with in public. Of course, wearing our masks, hand sanitizers, all the COVID protocols. So we invite you to please come participate, sign up, and we'd love to see you there. Thank you so much.